Our immigration policy means that we have some people who can come into this country, whom we might want to say no to, and others whom we might want to attract, who can't currently come in. So it's not, for me, a matter of numbers. It's a matter of the type of people that we want in this country.
What we very much want is to have the kind of immigration policy that John Howard brought into Australia, where you take people into your country who want to become part of your country, who want to become part of your culture, and who have skills to bring that will benefit society. And of course, what free movement means, it means free healthcare, it means free education, it means free access to the benefit system, it means an open door to the criminal gangs and the modern-day Fagins, who will of course benefit from the fact that London is the most successful and wealthy international city in Europe.
But it's a matter of plain common sense that we can't totally abolish frontier controls if we are also to protect our citizens from crime and stop the movement of drugs, of terrorists and of illegal immigrants.
In order to continue to exist, the Soviet Union spread itself further and further. The moment it stopped spreading, it started collapsing. And I suspect the same is true of the European Union.
I think that the £350 million we give to the EU every week is better spent by politicians here who are accountable to the British people.
Corruption was built into the Soviet system from top down, and so it is in the EU. The same endemic corruption activity that we saw in the old Soviet Union has flourished in the EU.
Our membership of the European Union costs us £33 billion every year in terms of additional regulation that holds business back.
It still costs us some £10 billion a year in, year out, to belong to the club.
I actually think the £10 billion a year we spend on the European Union could be used to bring down our debts and spend more money on the health service.
That the price that we pay for our membership of the European Union, the £350 million that we send every week, is money that should be spent in accordance with their priorities, not money that should be spent in accordance with the needs and requirements of foreign politicians.
The gross subscription, of course, is almost twice as much, some £700 a year, year in, year out, from every household in the land.
In the EU, there are hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats with their huge salaries, their staff, servants, bonuses and privileges, their lifelong immunity from prosecution, which is simply shuffled from one position to another, no matter what they do or fail to do. Is this not exactly like the Soviet regime?
Well, we wouldn't be walking away from a free trade area. There's a free trade area. There's a free trade area that extends from the borders of Russia to Iceland at the moment, and Britain is in the middle of it. And I think it would be silly for anyone to suggest that Britain would be outside that free trade area.
However, it is implausible in the extreme that we wouldn't be able to negotiate a free trade agreement once outside.
We, as the world's sixth largest economy, are prohibited from making any bilateral trade deals with any other country in the world. That can only be done for us by the European Union.
And I think the very factors that make it certain that we would thrive on our own, the fact that we are the fifth biggest economy in the world, the fact that we are the biggest military power in Europe, the fact that our institutions are more stable and deeply rooted than in any other European country, and of course the fact that we are the second largest contributor to the EU's budget, all those factors mean that we would be sorely missed if we did leave.
The EU, with its single market, is the slowest growing economic bloc in the world, and there is no reason to believe that this is going to change.
One of the big problems with the European Union is that it's held us back. Our share of trade with the European Union has actually diminished during the time that we've been in the EU.
It may come as a great shock to the little Europeans that most of the world is not in the European Union. And most of these countries are doing much better than most of the European Union.
I'm going to be campaigning to leave the European Union because I actually believe the European Union is now holding this country back. There are things that we could and should be doing in the interest of this country that we simply cannot do as members of the EU.
The European Parliament is living out a federal fantasy which is no longer sustainable.
No, I think this is the safer choice. I think if we leave the European Union, we take back control. People in this country will have control over our money, over our laws, over politicians.
This country is the greatest on earth, not because it's the biggest and it's the strongest, but because it has the most brilliant people.
Every time we've stood outside the European Union's institutions, people have predicted disaster. People have said, if we're outside the euro or outside the ERM, it will be terrible. Actually, every time we've stepped outside, we've been in a stronger position. The same people who said, adopt the euro or disaster looms, have been proven wrong. And they're the people now who are saying, stay in the EU or disaster looms.
I don't think we should talk ourselves down one bit at all. I'm an internationalist and I believe that we have a lot that we can do in terms of growing our country, our economy and flourishing outside of the European Union.
I have never heard such a lot of pessimistic downsizing of Britain's aspects. You know, Britain is a phenomenal country, the 5th largest in the world. It has stood alone and fought for freedom. It has traded. It has been a global trader. It can yet again be a global trader. Why would we have such a low opinion of the British people that we go out and talk about leaping into the dark, we talk about profound shocks, we talk about them not being capable, that we're too small? I have a different view. My view is Britain is a great country.
Over the centuries, we have fought to prevent Europe from falling under the dominance of a single power. We have fought and we have died for her freedom.
The nature of the European Union is bureaucracy, the failure of the single currency, the problems that it's had with migration. All of them point to the fact that it is an old-fashioned model. It's sclerotic. It's out of date. Britain could be a leader in shaping the 21st century.
And what we need now is to take decisions on the next steps forward, rather than let ourselves be distracted by utopian goals.
The old Soviet system was incapable of reform, so is the European Union. But there is an alternative to being ruled by those 24 self-appointed officials in Brussels. It is called independence. You don't have to accept what they have planned for you. After all, you have never been asked if you wanted to join.
Its own flag, its own currency, its own foreign and defence policies, its own courts and legal officers, its own federal police force. What this document confirms, in short, is the desire to set up a supranational government which is not elected and which the peoples of Europe cannot call to account or dismiss. It marks the transformation of Europe, in effect, into a one-party state.
How we can use our land, British land, has already been removed from elected local and county councils and is directed from Brussels. Every region's plans now have to fit into the Brussels plan.
I have lived in your future, and it didn't work.